Reagan won the presidency in 1980 and served the American people for 2 terms. The 40th president left a profound impact on both the United States and the international community as a whole. This is the Reagan Era. Reagan's influence transcends far beyond just the years of his presidency. His impacts on economic growth, foreign affairs, and technological advancements make him arguably one of the greatest presidents in United States history.
It really ranked very high in public opinion polls as one of the most favorite presidents, and while he was president, he always did very well.
Reagan's popularity is unmatched by any politician today. During the 1980 election, he won in a landslide, for he was a beloved American hero. In the words of someone who did not vote for Reagan, "I'm embarrassed to say that I voted for Mondale. I'm so upset that I didn't have the brains to vote for Reagan. I was so foolish, and I wish I could have voted for Reagan." Most importantly, he was just the kind of strong leader that our nation needed after Carter. He was a man with strong leadership qualities and honorable character, allowing him to be incredibly productive without being a dictator. Unlike the former president, he was fully prepared to do whatever it took to advance the nation. Reagan had a clear vision of what the nation should be, and spelled out the direction he hoped it would take during his administration. Reagan's first day in office set the tone for this historic leader. Prior to Reagan's presidency, 52 American hostages had been held for 444 days in Iran after radicals stormed the United States Embassy. Tensions were incredibly high with Iran, and none of Carter's efforts to free these innocent people were effective. However, on the day of Reagan's inauguration, they were released. Many people believe that Reagan is the reason these hostages were released. Unlike Carter, he could not be manipulated or controlled. He was a confident leader who was willing to stand up for the nation. However, Americans were still weary regarding the country's future.
Everybody figured Reagan was going to get assassinated because there's a thing called the zero factor that was put in place when Garfield got assassinated. All presidents elected in the 0 year got assassinated and killed, up to Ronald Reagan.
69 days into his administration, Reagan was shot in the chest by John Hinckley Jr. Mr. Hinckley was psychotic and searching for national fame in order to get close to a celebrity that he stalked. Fortunately, Reagan made a full recovery and was back to work in a matter of weeks. Americans had a new sense of pride after the shooting, and Reagan came to fully personify an even greater American hero. Despite being shot, Reagan was a defender of the right to bear arms and personal liberties for all Americans. The nation rallied behind him and exhibited a new sense of national pride which had been missing. This new nationalism became a key factor in the long road ahead during the Cold War. Reagan's foreign policy can be summed up as being peace through strength. Essentially, he believed that the appeasement and succumbing to the pressures of the Cold War would only perpetuate it. When you look back at it, we had a Cold War and not one missile was fired in any direction. We were able to withstand the Cold War and the Soviet Union. We had a stronger economy and stood fast on our principles as Americans. Jim Waldron. To combat the booming Russian space program, Reagan proposed his Star Wars, which would develop a national defense system in space. The goal of this was to protect the nation from nuclear weapons and attacks from Russia. Additionally, Reagan worked personally with NASA to develop the first permanently manned space station. Primarily, he wished to beat the Russians in space by making the United States Freedom Station larger and better than that of Russia's. Not only did America want this, but it was necessary for winning the war. The philosophy being that if the United States could beat the USSR in space, we would prove that America was superior. America ultimately won the space race, for the Soviet Union spent beyond their means and were incredibly inefficient in doing so. While this major accomplishment created many new jobs, Reagan still needed to correct many economic issues. Economic growth throughout the 1970s was fairly stagnant and consumer confidence was low. In response, Reagan pushed for economic policies now known as Reaganomics. It consisted of a 25% tax cut in the first term of his presidency, which was part of a budget that was easily passed, a stark contrast to the 113th Congress we have today. Lower taxes allowed for increased investment and consumption amongst all classes of Americans. At the same time, freeing up regulations on businesses allowed for incredible long-term growth and a spirit of entrepreneurship. Reagan himself said, "The best welfare program is a job." His economic policies were truly the epitome of what the American government can do to grow the economy. Unlike many former leaders, Reagan acknowledged the nation's economic hardships. Despite his best efforts to clean up Carter's mess, the nation sank into recession in 1982. Reagan never lost hope, though, for he continued to make reforms and cut taxes to better the nation. His goal was to increase investments, better the economy, get the nation out of debt, and have an equal number of imports and exports. The recession was very short-lived, and soon the United States GDP was growing at rates of 4% and all of the jobs were recovered. Reagan is often remembered for the overall decrease of marginal tax rates and protecting the value of American dollar, while more and more Americans were finally able to have fulfilling long-term jobs. As a direct result of Reagan's success bettering the job market, businesses were able to broaden their horizons. He incentivized hard work through lower taxes and regulations, while the demand for military technology and engineering also provided opportunities for Americans to finally showcase their brainpower. This allowed Americans to make new strides in the field of technology. Yet many scientific projects during the Reagan administration did not come to public eye until after Reagan left office. However, they did give the United States undercover leverage over the Soviets. Inventions like the GPS and stealth bomber plane greatly aided the United States in Iran during the administration of George Bush Sr. If it had not been for Reagan, these valued strides in technology might not have occurred. Not only do we owe the victory of the Cold War to Ronald Reagan, but all the victories in the future that harness these valued assets. Furthermore, many of our so-called necessities came out of the Reagan era as well. Technology like the VCR, personal computers, and most importantly cell phones were direct results of progress in America. These strides in technology were made possible by Reagan, and in doing so, he became part of everyday life for Americans. Even now, you are unknowingly being influenced by Reagan. Every time you pick up that cell phone or type on your computer, you should thank Reagan for inspiring opportunities for these inventions. Furthermore, you should thank Reagan for preserving your freedom. By standing up to the Soviets and effectively utilizing diplomacy, he was able to accomplish a remarkable task. He readied the situation well and responded in the most effective way possible. Whether that was going horseback riding with Gorbachev or speaking out against communism, Reagan never held back. He confidently stood at the Berlin Wall with the eyes of the world upon him, commanding Gorbachev to tear down the wall and end incredible polarization between the free world and communists. In an iconic and historic speech, he changed the fate of the free world in an instant.
General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Even though President Reagan is no longer alive, his legacy will not be soon forgotten. How will history remember Reagan? History will remember Reagan as the first Cold War president to preside over 8 years of unbroken peace, the first to reach an arms reduction accord with the Soviets, and the American president who helped make it possible for Mikhail Gorbachev to begin the process of restructuring Soviet society. The wall being torn down was more than just a matter between the East and West Germany, or even the United States and the Soviet Union. Just as the wall fell, many more obstacles to freedom and prosperity fell too for those across the globe. When it comes to Reagan's legacy, there is no generation gap, no faded memories. His hopeful visions and hard work are still admired today and will be in the years to follow.